Welcome to Leveraging Workplace Safety to Benefit All. The presenter today is Allencia Ballard. Allencia has been designing and delivering curriculum and learning materials to teach adults in the business and education sectors for over 20 years. She is an OSHA-authorized general industry outreach trainer with 10 years of safety and environmental health experience, specializing in hazard recognition and machine guarding safety. She holds a master's degree in project management. Born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, she now resides in Northwest Indiana. Welcome, Allencia. We are very glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Glad to be here. Today's topic, as you mentioned, for our Lunch and Learn is leveraging safety to benefit all. You may be wondering, what does that topic mean? You may be wondering, how does this even relate to me? So here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be looking at the ways we use safety in the workplace and at times even our own personal safety in order to help benefit us in so many different ways. In most cases, people think of safety and they just think it's all about people going home safe. As we say in the safety world, we want people to go home the same way they came to work that day, with all their fingers and all their toes and so forth. But safety goes beyond that. Safety is a much bigger part of our corporate culture than most of us may even realize. So today we're going to be talking about how those partnerships, the structure of safety, the structure of the organization, what the impact of the company's leadership, and even the actions and the repeated actions that we take, what do all of those things have to do with safety in the workplace? So let's look at safety, for example, in our region here in Northwest Indiana. So one of the things that we all, I think, agree, if you're here today with us in this webinar, listening to this recording, you already believe that the workers in our region deserve a safe workplace. They're, in fact, counting on us to provide the training that they need in order to improve their safety awareness. So it is the company's obligation and responsibility to make sure they're educating all of their workers on workplace safety. Now, one of the most common things that you want to think about when you're talking about workplace safety is hazard recognition. And how do you teach employees how to recognize hazards? Well, that's where your partnership is going to come into play. It is important to partner with strong community partners who have a vested interest in the safety of the region's workers. And it's also important to partner with someone who's knowledgeable in that field. It's not something that you want to go it alone if you don't have to. So if you don't have employees or partnerships already within the organization that can provide the education your workers need in order to get the safety training that they need, then of course, please turn to IUN for that partnership. Looking at the state of safety in the U.S., as we focus on the regional perspective, we can consider the fact that manufacturing companies make up a large portion of what OSHA defines as general industry employers. In Indiana alone, several manufacturing companies were recently fined a combined total of $1.75 million for violations related to things like fall protection, lockout, tagout, those big 10 that OSHA refers to. Now, nationally, we have regulatory bodies that issue workplace safety laws and standards and regulations, all in an effort to keep our workers safe. As employers, you have a responsibility and an obligation to abide by those workplace standards, regulations, and laws. How do you do that if you don't know what they are? Well, one of the things that you can do is provide or get the education and the training to understand what regulations you are obligated to abide by, what the standards and laws and regulations are for your industry. That's going to be very important as you determine what your safety culture looks like in the organization. Now, think about your organization today. Are employers are employees reluctant to report incidents? Do they fear disciplinary action if they get hurt or if they damage property? Are the policies and procedures that you've outlined applied across the board to everyone equally, the same time, every time? Does company leadership align themselves with the safety rules and the messages that they put out? Meaning, do they walk the walk? Do their actions align with their words? Are they just preaching safety, or are they literally following it? Is the message clear and concise? So think about where your organization is today. Understand what the culture is like today. Are employees working safe only when someone's watching? Or do employees embrace safety as a daily way of doing their jobs? Do they understand that safety rules are in place to protect them, not to slow down production or to prevent them from being able to do the work that they're hired to do? Whatever that situation is, whatever your organization looks like today, think about where you'd like your organization to be tomorrow. What improvements do you need? What changes does your culture need to see in order for your organization to grow, in order for you to go from being the organization you are today to the organization you want to be tomorrow? The organization of tomorrow should be one where employees are proactively seeking ways to contribute to safety improvements. They're looking for ways to mitigate hazards. They're making suggestions on improving safety. They're coming up with ideas for changes in the equipment or the tools or the products that they use in order to do their jobs more safely. In the organization of tomorrow, your employees should feel empowered to own and identify opportunities for those improvements. They should feel confident that when they bring these suggestions, company leadership will listen to them. They should feel listened to and they should feel heard. Then, once you get employees to that point where they're proactive and they can feel listened to and they feel heard, you support that through leadership that promotes and stands by and even follows the safety messages that they communicate to the rest of the workforce. Then and only then do you have a workforce whereby leadership and employees are working together, are working cohesively toward a common goal, which is to improve workplace safety. Now, I started this by talking about the fact that workplace safety, for so many people think, oh, it's just about making sure employees don't get hurt when they leave or while they're at work. And I told you that safety is so much more in the workplace. So let's talk about how much more safety is in the workplace, because it truly contributes in more ways than one. So safety starts at the top, and your leader's approach will directly impact the sustainability of the culture that you create throughout your organization. Simply put, as I like to say, the speed of the leader is the speed of the team. So if your leader does not practice what they preach, you can expect your employees to do the same. You can expect an employee's workforce whereby they only follow safety rules when no one's watching, or when there's a threat of discipline or some other negative result. But leaders can drive safety culture in a couple different ways, and here's four. Number one, leaders can actually lead the pack by doing those things that are tangible, that employees can see, that employees can start to believe in, that employees see are actually having an impact, a direct impact on their personal safety at work. Then in addition to that, leaders can walk the walk. If PPE is required in a certain area of the workplace, then leaders should be wearing that PPE. If certain tools in the workplace need to be guarded before use, then leaders are making sure they're guarded. In addition to that, leaders can look for opportunities to reach out to the employees who are actually doing the work, make those connections, and get those employees to buy in. And typically, that buy in comes from being able to listen and hear when employees have true, serious, and honest opinions about their own personal safety at work. And then finally, creating a system that's sustainable. That means moving away from the flavor of the month mentality. We follow safety rules all the time, not just when it's convenient or not just when it's safety month or safety week. So those are just some of the ways. So just kind of thinking about how we can consider expanding safety education for leaders. It goes beyond just the minimum requirements of education. It requires us all to think and act safe. It requires us all to look toward one another for additional help, to look toward one another for new ideas, new initiatives. It requires us to band together in support of those ideas and those initiatives and put them in place and make sure that they do work for everyone involved. So what's the action that you need to take? First and foremost, education is the key to your action. Without education, without understanding those laws and regulations and standards we talked about earlier, it's very difficult to create a safety program or a safety culture around it. And when we do take action, we have to be very deliberate in those actions. And that's where your safety training becomes critical. Remember, your employees at minimum need the safety training that they require to do their job. OSHA standards and similar regulations and regulatory bodies, those are just the minimum requirements. But who wants to do the minimum? The idea here is to engage safety to the point that it becomes part of your core values at your company. And that's the goal you want to have. So just kind of looking at some of the things that OSHA training that we would offer would be providing. So for manufacturing, you can look forward to having courses that talk specifically about machine guarding, materials handling, even hand hygiene, because we realize manufacturing is not always just widgets and gadgets. Sometimes it's food manufacturing. But those are some of the topics that are covered. Regardless the products that you make, the training that's provided in the OSHA 10-hour training is critical and key to employees in the manufacturing environment. Landscaping is another big company or big part of the general industry category. So hearing protection, hand safety, and ergonomics are just some of the topics covered. And you may be thinking, why hearing protection? Well, if you've ever used a lawnmower, you may not even realize how loud they truly are. Most lawnmowers register at a level of 85 decibels or more. It only takes 75 decibels to start to cause hearing loss. And so therefore, for workers in the landscaping profession, where they're riding lawnmowers and using chainsaws to cut branches or other hand tools and things of that nature, where those loud noises are constant of their daily work, hearing protection becomes very, very critical. Same thing with hand safety and even ergonomics, as sometimes there's a lot of bending and kneeling and twisting in that type of job. So in those trades where physical labor can be demanding, especially when we're talking about labor that happens primarily outdoors, heat illness is also a very big concern. And again, our OSHA 10-hour training addresses all of these. And there's also the possibility for you to customize the courses to provide additional training that you may need specific to your organization. And then we talk about retail and office employees. So you may be wondering, well, what's so hazardous about the office or about retail work? Well, chances are a stapler won't, send you to the emergency room. However, we do have employees and in the office and retail environment where they could potentially be exposed to bloodborne pathogens. If they are, would they know how to respond? Probably not without the proper training. But there are other soft skills that they use that create safety hazards. For example, do any of your employees have ergonomic issues? If they're sitting at a computer keyboard all day, are their desks and their keyboards arranged properly to prevent ergonomic hazards, to prevent injuries such as carpal tunnel syndrome or anything like that? How about ladders? Are you using ladders or step stools in any area of the office or the retail location? Falls are one of the biggest hazards and biggest sources of injuries to American workers and has been for the last 5 to 7 years. So many times we think of falls as someone falling from a high place or elevated platform, but sometimes a fall from a ladder or even a step stool can create or can cause injuries that could be life altering to some degree. So as we think about injuries, or as we think about industries whereby employees might need safety training, it's everywhere. It's safety training is important to all employees, regardless the industry, regardless the nature of work that they do. We all have hazards that we encounter on a daily basis. So once the learning has happened, once you've made the commitment to get your employees trained or to get your leadership trained, now comes time to reinforce what you've learned. And you want to reinforce the learning and the training that's been received by retraining at every opportunity. When an employee makes a mistake, think of that as a learning opportunity. Think of that as another opportunity to coach or train. It's really easy to blame the employee for not following a rule or a procedure that they've been trained on. It's harder to remember sometimes that we're all human and sometimes we need that reinforcement. So be prepared to reinforce the training, to reinforce the learning often, and encourage practical use of the training that your employees have received once they receive it. So here's a couple things I want to share with you just to help you see the benefits. Number one, when we talk about education, the education will come, and the workflow that happens in the workplace should support that. It should reiterate the learning, and it should reiterate it should be reiterated through the communications. The written safety plans and the written safety programs will explain how that learning is applied, how it should be applied. And then you want to make sure that you inform employees so that they can make better decisions. Informed employees actually can contribute in many ways to create a healthier and safer work environment. Those trained employees, once they've been taught how to mitigate and identify safety hazards in the workplace, trained employees typically have fewer incidents and accidents. Then when we fold leadership as the third part of this benefit, I would call it a triangle. The leadership is what's going to drive cultivating that environment, because they are going to create that environment where employees feel empowered to identify and mitigate hazards on their own. They'll feel empowered to speak up and share concerns and ideas about their own personal safety. In these environments where employees feel more empowered, they obviously feel safer, and safer employees are typically happier employees and more productive employees as well. So the bottom line is that safety training for an employer can lead to more productive employees to begin with. So what are your next steps? Start building the safety culture you want to see by enrolling in the OSHA 10-hour course. Stay tuned because we will have additional courses in this series in the months to come. Any questions?
Thank you, Allencia, for that presentation. We do have a few questions. First of all, can you talk a little bit more about the 10-hour training? Does that happen in one day, over a period of time? Is it going to be, is it something that's run over Zoom or in person? Can you talk more about that?
So yes, I can. Thank you, Amanda. So the 10-hour training can happen in a multitude of ways. Typically, 2 days or more is what you would be looking at. And while there's no maximum number of days we could spread out the 10-hour training over, there is a minimum number. So we can do no less than 2 days to do all 10 hours worth of training. But if we can customize, so if an employer was interested in, say, having the course spread out over a month of Saturdays, every Saturday for a month or something to that effect, we can make it custom. As long as we cover all 10 hours of material, that's the most important thing in order to satisfy the requirements for the OSHA 10-hour training.
And are those typically done in person then?
Yes, they would typically be done in person.
Great. Yeah, another follow-up would be, is there some kind of certification that employees who participate in that training will receive?
Very good question. So with the OSHA 10-hour training, each person who completes that training will receive an OSHA 10-hour card. Now, OSHA doesn't certify. However, that 10-hour card is the indication that an individual would use to show that they've satisfactorily completed that specific training. It's really good for individuals who may be looking for another job. They may be looking to make themselves more attractive to an employer by showing that they have had this training. But also for employers, it's really good to have this training because it's essentially that extra step forward, right? It's going beyond doing just the minimum. So while OSHA requires that employers train all of their employees on the hazards in their workplace, OSHA does not require employers to provide the OSHA 10-hour or 30-hour training. But the benefit for employers to do so is to create a workforce of employees who have had specific training in hazard mitigation and hazard identification, and they have specific training, specific OSHA training on things like machine guarding, bloodborne pathogens, confined space entry, hand safety, fall protection, all sorts of different things, even hazard communication, emergency evacuation procedures, and things of that nature. So all things that are critical and important in the workplace. And so as we were talking about the partnerships, this is a great way to partner for education because many employers don't have the manpower to have an employee provide this training for them. That's one of the reasons we're offering it today.
Great, thank you, Allencia. And I think our last question you had already answered, which is whether or not these 10-hour trainings are a mandatory one by OSHA. And I think you already answered that, but is there anything more you wanted to say on that question?
Yes, I will just reiterate, it is not mandatory. However, it is one of the best practices I would say in the industry is to provide that. And I do know that a lot of people who have had the class, many people take the 10-hour and they enjoy it so much. I see a lot of people come back and take the 30-hour to gain even more knowledge about safety. But what's I think most important too for a lot of your employers who may be listening to this, what they should know is that the training can be customized. It can be done on their site or at IUN. It can be spread over a few days or even a month or two if necessary. We can customize and make things work for their schedule so as not to impede and interrupt productivity at the workplace.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Allencia, for answering those questions. And it does not look like we have any more. So I will just once again, thank you so much for taking the time to present. And I thank you to everyone for joining us and for watching.
Thank you, Amanda.